Wichita Liberty TV, featuring host Bob Weeks. Local politics without the spin. Interviews with nationally respected economists. Hear directly from Kansas conservatives about what matters to you. It's individual liberty, limited government, and free markets. Wichita Liberty TV.
Hello, I'm Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV, your weekly source for news, analysis, and commentary about Wichita and Kansas government and public affairs. Broadcast on Great Plains Television, channel 26.1, also its companion website, KGPT26.com. Some of you may know me from my blog, The Voice for Liberty, at wichitaliberty.org. There the motto is individual liberty, limited government, free markets, and economic freedom in Kansas and Wichita. If you'd like to learn more about the issues covered today or to contact me, well, please visit wichitaliberty.org. You can subscribe to the email newsletter, like The Voice for Liberty on Facebook, or follow me, Bob Weeks, on Twitter. Well, this week on Wichita Liberty TV, Joseph Ashby needs little introduction to Wichita area radio listeners. His show is broadcast Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. on KQAM radio. That's at 1480 on your AM dial. Also on the internet and the TuneIn radio app. You can also catch his daily podcast on his Facebook page, Joseph Ashby Show. Now, Joseph Ashby. Well, Joseph Ashby, welcome to Wichita Liberty TV.
Thanks, Bob.
So we're recording the day after the New Hampshire primary here, and boy, things are really heating up. Last year was the Iowa caucuses, yesterday New Hampshire primary. I think in about a week or so, the South Carolina primary, and then Super Duper Tuesday. Fill us in, Joseph. What do you think's happened? What are some of the big takeaways from especially New Hampshire yesterday?
I think Marco Rubio's slide to fifth place is the biggest single story.
Mm-hmm.
If you
Now, third, fourth, and fifth were very close.
Very close, right.
Between Cruz, Bush, and Rubio, I think, in that order.
Yeah. In as much as it seemed like either you were going to have to move, that Rubio was going to win the establishment vote. You know, if you add up, if you throw in Christie, Rubio, Kasich, Bush, right? If you had all those percentages up, because those are kind of voters looking for a similar thing, then you would have got more than Donald Trump. And that's sort of the theory, that Trump has this low ceiling. I don't know if that's true, but that's one of the theories that's out there.
Heard that a lot. And in the New Hampshire primary, Donald Trump got, what was it, like 35%?
35%.
So roughly 1/3 of the votes, which means there's 2/3 up to that prefer somebody else.
Right.
And today we just learned that Chris Christie and Carly Fiorina are stepping aside. So there's a handful of percent between the two of them to divvy up.
Sure. So I guess the assumption was, after Marco Rubio did so well in Iowa, that it would be almost impossible for Bush and Kasich and Christie, of course Christie, as you said, was out, to stay in the race. Now it looks like Bush and Kasich would stay in. Now, it's been a few weeks since any polls were taken, public polls were taken in South Carolina. Kasich had almost no support, but Bush had 10%. So,
wow.
So that's a significant number. And if those three are still dividing up the same three votes, it's hard to picture a scenario where it's not a race where Trump is the favorite, Cruz has a shot, and then the three establishment candidates split the vote and don't beat either of those other two guys.
Yeah, I think Marco Rubio did make a big deal of his 3-2-1 strategy, coming third in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, and then he felt he had a good chance in South Carolina, but certainly that strategy didn't pan out in New Hampshire for him.
All centered around about 4 minutes in a debate with Chris Christie, right? Where
yeah, he didn't. People say he had a good debate other than just a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And I saw someone, I can't remember who it was, on morning television this morning, but it was a Republican semi-official or something like that. And he said, Trump or Christie hurt Marco Rubio, but he didn't help himself.
No,
Christie
not really.
didn't. So kind of thinking, that's bad for the party altogether. But anyway, I guess I thought a big news, well, of course, Donald Trump being the obvious winner. John Kasich coming in a strong second spot, although Trump got twice as many votes as he did.
Well, to me, John Kasich is John Huntsman Jr., except kind of not quite even as good as John Huntsman Jr., where they both got about 17%. In New Hampshire, that was really the only state where they were competitive in. You got 2%. Kasich got 2% in Iowa. Yeah. Last we heard, he was polling at 3% in South Carolina. So it seems to me that he was the New York Times editorial page favorite politician who is good for the mid-teens.
The kiss of death amongst Republicans.
That's good for the mid-teens. Good for the mid-teens in New Hampshire, and not very good anywhere else.
So I think maybe the Wall Street Journal this morning editorialized, good for Kasich finishing second. Maybe he can parlay that into some real fast fundraising that would allow him to, start to wage a serious campaign in South Carolina. Because otherwise, I don't think he really has much money going forward.
Yeah, and we have found in this cycle that money is pretty overrated. Donald Trump and Ted Cruz by far have run the most economical campaigns, and they have the most delegates.
I think there was a chart showing for New Hampshire dollars spent per vote gained, and Jeb Bush was like $1,200 per vote gained, and Cruz was down at $20 or $30 or something, because he really didn't put up a big effort in New Hampshire, did he?
Not a monetary effort. I mean, he had the volunteers, he had the grassroots support that you would see, but certainly he thought, I will let the more establishment-minded candidates that appeal to the voters, primary voters in New Hampshire, fight it out, and I'll set my flag in Iowa and then South Carolina.
Yeah. So, Joseph, I remember, and I'm not saying this to say nanny boo-boo or anything, but last summer when you were on, I think you did express mention two candidates that you thought you liked in particular. One was Ted Cruz, and the other was Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who dropped out. Walker did a long time ago. Do you think that some of these people quit too early, do you think?
Well, in the case of Walker, he ran a campaign that was expensive enough, broad enough to win, and it was very expensive. And his early fundraising was very good. His fundraising dried up. And so he's basically like, look, I could stay in the race at a bargain basement price, but I wouldn't have a chance to win. And so that's really why he got out. Whenever I think of people who got out too soon, I think of someone like Tim Pawlenty in 2012 when there was that revolving door of frontrunners, the not Romney frontrunners, and he got out before he realized that there would be a revolving door. In this case, I would say people are dropping out at about the right pace.
Okay. Well, hold on to that thought, Joseph, because we're going to take a moment off for a commercial break here. This is Bob Weeks for Wichita Liberty TV. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week, radio talk show host Joseph Ashby. So, there's been some editorials today talking about both the Democrats and the Republicans, talking about how the establishment of both of those parties is just, almost having a stroke or a heart attack by now because of the winners, strong winners too. I mean, Bernie Sanders really put down Hillary Clinton in a big way, and then also Donald Trump too on the Republican side. So I don't know. I mean, I think I mentioned to you a while ago that, no one really admits to being part of the establishment, either Republican or Democrat. So I don't know. Is that even a useful concept?
I think there are people who are around politics, either in elected office or in consultancy and media, that have a concept of what the right candidate, what a winning candidate should have. And someone who calls himself a socialist or someone who is the face of a temporary federal government shutdown, those aren't it. That's not it, right? Those are the kinds of things that make
Ted Cruz the shutdown.
Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders, right? So someone who does not fit the mold of what a traditional campaign is, or a traditional personality or traditional record, does not appeal to a certain segment of people who feel like they know how to get presidential winners. Now, establishment, I mean, we've talked about this before, Bob, where is it a mindset? Is it a set of policy? It's a lot of those things, but it is a little bit amorphous to describe. And that way you can have someone like Donald Trump who's anti-establishment, but says things like everybody's going to be covered in healthcare and the government's going to pay for it. And you're like, whoa, that's like way to the left of any Republican rhetoric I ever hear. Right. So it's not exactly a left-right spectrum policy thing. It's more of an attitude sort of thing in a lot of people's minds.
I think a lot of the exit polling from yesterday by various organizations said people are just mad at government in general, and I think both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump are really specifically trying to tap into that sentiment.
Yeah, Donald Trump has been the financier of everything that we hate in government, right? He's the one that spread his money around to the biggest power plays: Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton through the Clinton Foundation. And then you have Bernie Sanders, who's been in Congress about as long as I've been alive. And now his voting record is very liberal, and so you might say, well, he's wanted more progressive things, and that appeals to the Democrat base, the Democrat primary electorate. But anti-establishment or the way things are in Washington, I'm not exactly sure that I agree that either of those people fit that mold.
You know, over the weekend, I think when the polling was really bad for Hillary in New Hampshire, I saw stories about, you know, this pro-Jeb Bush super PAC or whatever is revving up again, and on the Republican side, you know, there was that issue of National Review a couple weeks ago. The whole thing was against Donald Trump, so it's really going to be, I mean, a lot of conflict coming up, I think, one way or the other.
Yeah, you know, and I think the plan in a lot of people's minds was, in a lot of campaigns' minds, in the establishment lane, those four candidates was, well, if Donald Trump beats Ted Cruz in Iowa, Ted Cruz is going to have a hard time continuing to mount a good campaign. And then that didn't happen. And then it was, well, once Ted Cruz sort of bloodied the bully's nose in Donald Trump in Iowa, then maybe the sheen is off, maybe he won. Well, that didn't happen. He won by more than even his polling average said he was going to win by. So there is a situation where the control that the establishment, you know, as we've sort of defined it, the people who generally know what they want out of presidential candidates and get it, that they don't have the kind of control that it seemed like they had in 2012 when it was like, nope, it's Romney, nope, it's Romney. 2008, McCain's going to be our best bet. And there was a lot of people who didn't like that, but they could never quite coalesce around someone or around the ideas necessary or get the fervor necessary to beat either of those two guys. It seems like the fervor is there to beat the establishment favorites this time.
So do you think it's going to be Donald Trump for the Republicans, or will something else happen, do you think? I'm not saying who, but I mean, does someone other than Trump eventually become the nominee?
One thing that makes me think that is the exit polls last night. Donald Trump won by about 4 points those who consider themselves very conservative in New Hampshire. And I thought to myself, if with all that we've known, you know, with, like you say, the National Review issue, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, some of these talk shows really coming out, people who have big voices among that voter demographic, really coming out and saying, look, he's great for a lot of things, he's wonderful rhetorically, he has good positions on some of these issues, but look at the full body of work, look at what he says he's going to do. And if a large segment, a winning plurality of very conservative people in New Hampshire can hear that and ignore it, then I think that he is the favorite to win.
Yeah. Well, I think it may have been the Wall Street Journal this morning editorialized that what the other Republican candidates need to do is to stop fighting each other, kind of like, you know, we know that I think Bush and Rubio have been, you know, a lot of advertising directed against him. Need to start educating people about who the real Donald Trump is. That's the Wall Street Journal editorial page's advice for some of the lesser tier candidates.
What's interesting is most of the people outside of Ted Cruz, let's say the non-Ted Cruz candidates who have gone after Trump, it's almost all been on style or from the left, right? Lindsey Graham attacks him for being xenophobic and racist and sexist. And I'm just like, what? Like, that's, the left says stuff like that. The left makes accusations that are really unfounded. I mean, you might not like his policies. You might find that they are distasteful or that they'll be rejected by a certain group of people. But there's nothing really to show that Donald Trump is racist. And so if they're going from attacking him the way a leftist would attack him, if they are going to only attack his personality and his style, then I think they'll fall as flat as the other attacks. The only person who's really pushed hard back near the end in Iowa was Ted Cruz, and he did it on conservative principles and a little bit on temperament. And if they go that route, I think they have a chance of eroding his support.
And it seems like Donald Trump has been moderating some of his personality, although in the past week he dropped the F-bomb on the campaign trail, and he says he didn't say it. He says, I just mouthed it.
Well, he also repeated a word that I don't want to use
Yeah.
about Ted Cruz. Moderating,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
And I don't know if you've ever seen the Comedy Central roast of Donald Trump from about 4
I've
years
seen it.
ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm ashamed, Joseph, to admit that I understand what some of those jokes, how those jokes were. And I don't understand some of them, but this is what Donald Trump wanted. I mean, he knows what goes on there. People making fun of his many wives, his many foreign wives, too. And this is something funny, too, about, he's married twice to immigrants, which I think is just another example of immigrants doing the disgusting jobs Americans won't do. On that note, we are going to take another commercial break. This is Wichita Liberty TV, and I'm Bob Weeks. Welcome back to Wichita Liberty TV. I'm Bob Weeks, and with me this week, radio talk show host Joseph Ashby. Now, in some of the exit polling, people have been attracted to Donald Trump because he's someone who tells it like it is. But I wonder, well, what is he really saying? And I listened a little bit to your show this morning, and you played some excerpts from Milton Friedman talking about the benefits of free trade, America trading with other people on a free basis. While Donald Trump, I mean, he wants to punish a lot of our trading partners like China, talking about a 45% tariff. He's going to force Mexico to build the wall. Otherwise, we're going to penalize them in trade or something like that. So does that provide a way for perhaps people to attack Donald Trump on, yeah, he says what he thinks, but what he thinks is pretty, awful sometimes?
That particular issue is hard. That's something that me as a talk radio host, like, I'll just tell you what I think. But if you heard that part of the show this morning, I got calls pushing back, like, what? No, we don't make anything anymore. Just the emotional attachment that many Americans have towards our manufacturing base is very similar to the emotional attachment that people have, and we see it in Kansas, towards farming, where everybody used to work on that. We used to have these thriving small farming communities, and now they're so small, and they're no longer thriving. And that emotional attachment, even though we produce more than we ever have from a farming standpoint, we produce more than we ever have from a manufacturing standpoint as far as dollars and cents, those parts of our economy are still really strong, but it does not employ nearly as many people.
And kind of the problem with trade is people see the factory that closes down, and the news media can go there and they see exactly who's getting laid off or whatever. The benefits of trade are much more dispersed and more difficult to see, I think.
So because, even people who are loyal to their talk show hosts, that are a fan, that think that someone like me gets it right, is uncomfortable even hearing that people oppose Trump on, we got to make more stuff here and so on. And so I don't know if that's the right one. I think more universal health care, his border provisions where he talks about they have to go back, they can come right back. It's more like a touchback provision, which was considered sort of a weaselly way into getting amnesty without it calling it amnesty, that Kay Bailey Hutchinson, former Texas senator, proposed last time. That was all up. So that he certainly has weaknesses on issues that will be important to people in South Carolina. I don't know, because it's so difficult to explain trade and foreign trade, that I don't know that that's the one that I would pick to go against him on.
That's probably kind of a more esoteric issue on that. So but I think, the universal health care, eminent domain, that's something a lot of people feel strongly about. But again, it's one of these kind of fringe issues, and I don't know if that's really fruitful. He came back and he said, well, if we don't have eminent domain, you can't have the Keystone XL pipeline, perhaps not realizing that that is a private project, not a public project. It's privately owned. Even most Republicans, I think, are in favor of eminent domain for a highway or something like that. But a highway is publicly owned, not privately, typically. So.
Yeah. And I thought actually Jeb Bush did a good job saying, well, we're not talking about roads and infrastructure. You wanted to tear down a lady's house. You sued to tear down a lady's house so you could build a limousine parking garage. Yeah. And so that was among the grossest. And we've seen that kind of cronyism in Wichita a lot, where people just get such favorable deals on land. Eminent domain has not been a huge issue, but this idea that a local government or a state government or even a federal government has to jump in and say, in order to increase the tax base, right, and have this great business in our community, we're going to take property away from somebody, sometimes without even fair compensation.
Yeah. But, I think some of the exit polling from yesterday too said, people are very concerned about the economy and jobs. And so, anybody who comes out really kind of demagogic in some ways, just appealing to people's fears and so forth. And I think that's what Donald Trump's doing.
Well, when he stands up and he says, I'm going to be the greatest jobs president ever, and he says, we're going to win with China. Well, what is win with China? It's somewhere between a 25 and a 45% import tax on China. That's not going to be good for American jobs. It's going to force people to buy American goods at a higher price than they were buying Chinese goods. But that slows down your economy. It doesn't go up. Right. And so that sort of rhetoric might work. It worked for Richard Nixon, right? Richard Nixon did wage and price controls, even though he knew it was economic poison, but he knew it was politically popular.
Gerald Ford continued that. I remember the win buttons, whip inflation now, and some price controls on gasoline and things like that.
So sometimes the economically awful thing to do is the politically popular thing to do, and that's the case with some of Trump's positions.
Yeah. Well, next week we're going to have a guest on here talking about civic education, and maybe some of those topics will go in there too. Well, Joseph, we've got just about a minute left there, and I had a candidate that I favored, and he's not in there anymore, but at least he ran, if you can understand who that is. Joseph, do you have any favorite candidates going forward? And you don't have to say if you don't want to, but candidates personally that you would see yourself voting for.
I've been pretty clear on the show that I'm very partial to Ted Cruz. I liked Rand Paul. To me, those were the two that I knew that if they got into office, that they would fight pretty darn hard to restore American constitutional government. I don't know that about anyone else in the race. I know that some people in the race won't do that, right? I mean, John Kasich's not that guy. Marco Rubio is better than Mitt Romney would have been, better than John McCain would have been, I think, the most conservative establishment favorite in probably our lifetime. But I think to myself, you got somebody who stood up for it, who you can count on. And so that's why I tend to be a bit partial to Cruz.
For me, I noticed that our Congressman Mike Pompeo, who I think both you and I think is doing a pretty good job, that he is strong in for Rubio. So it's at least something to think about for me anyway.
I think that's so personality-based, though. And Rubio has shown this. The Gang of Eight still scares me. Not just that he got behind the legislation, but when he was on talk radio and arguing for it, the things that the excuses that he used, the arguments that he used, I'm just like, man, if you think that, then I wonder what you think about a lot of other things. And so it's been really hard for me to have a lot of confidence in him going forward. Although, like I say, he's more conservative than John McCain was, certainly.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to leave it at that, Joseph. We are out of time. So, Joseph Ashby, thank you for appearing on Wichita Liberty TV. And we'll be back again next week. I'm Bob Weeks.